Hey guys, welcome back to Seeking God in the Wait, our video series that we're doing just to be an encouragement, to share a little bit of our story, just to get real with you guys, and hopefully you have a few things you can take away. Last time we talked about my time on the mission field. This time we're going to talk about Travis. And babe, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you went to the mission field, where you went, what you did. How that was for you.
Well, let me roll back a little bit. So my first long-term missions trip wasn't my first missions trip. The church that I was going to started offering, actually they had been doing it for a while, but was offering some opportunities to go to just short-term stuff like Mexico, Vietnam, a few other places in the world. And I thought, hey, what a good opportunity to just get out there and see what's out there in the world and just serve. And this was the time where, again, I was kind of walking in my faith and just didn't want to sit around and do nothing, right? And for me, growing up, I grew up in a small little town where traveling was just not an option. So I'm like, hey, let's give it a go.
Travel the world.
Let's hop on a plane and go to Vietnam, of all places. And
was that your first?
No, my first short-term missions trip was to Mexico. Okay. I mean, we just jumped the border and we were good to go, but it wasn't anything. My first overseas missions trip was Vietnam, which was definitely an eye-opener. That was the point that I started seeing things that I'm like, okay, what the heck am I thinking in America? I'm a spoiled little brat that's entitled to every little thing, and you go over there and they have nothing, and we're working with people with in the leper colonies and just people that are like the House of the Desolate, where it's just older people where they're like, okay, we don't really have much for you guys, so we're just going to throw all the older generation just in the middle of nowhere and just create this little colony. And so we worked a lot with people like that. So again, that was like a huge eye opener to what was out there in this world. So I think I had probably done like 5 or 6 missions trips, just kind of little short term ones. Actually, maybe more than that, because I did a few in Mexico too. And every single time I went, it was one of those things. God was really working on me and showing me things that I've never seen before, and just kind of opened my eyes to a whole different world. And do that, like that's one way that God was kind of building my character looking back. So instead of just a small little bubble I lived in Los Angeles by the beach, which was really nice, there was just so much more out there. And I think that was where my heart started to mourn for those that were in need. Because again, there's a lot of need in Los Angeles, of course, but I think that's where my passions to serve the poor began, and just to actually do missions. And fast forward a little bit, I was working at the church and God said, hey, it's time to move on. Probably about a couple months before that, I just finished school, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go somewhere and just pray for a month.
What did you study?
My studies was ministry. So basically pastoral. That's the short answer. So I just finished up school, and I'm like, okay, God, didn't want to go to school in the first place, but you opened up a door. I was faithful, walked through it, and now it's done. 4 years were up, and what next? So I was like, okay. So went to Australia, of all places. What a horrible place to go.
Missions. I'm going on a missions trip to Australia to go missionize the surfers.
Yes. That wasn't really a missions trip. Although there were tons of opportunity to preach the gospel. So, in one way, it was a missions trip.
So it was just like a timeout for you?
Yeah, so I spent a month. I just went, kind of traveled around Australia for a little bit. And that was my time. I said, God, what do you want me to do? Just pray about it. And I just felt like there was a tug on my heart saying, Travis, for 2014, I just want you to go. That's kind of like all I heard. And I'm like, I don't really know what that means. Go where? Do what? And I was like, God, if that's the case, you need to close the doors where you don't want me to be and open the doors where you want me to be. And that just became my prayer. And when you pray that, you just got to be very careful, because you start to see God work, and there's just a lot of change and transformation. So when I came back from Australia to LA, pretty much every door that I was involved in closed. So it was one of those, okay, God, you've closed the doors, now what? Like, where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? All these doors are closed. My life as I knew it has totally changed. And now all,
Your comfort zone.
My comfort zone, my schedule is fully opened. Like, I was self-employed at the time. And so I was a little bit more open to be able to do a lot more things. And through that, basically one of the pastors came up to me and says, why don't you go do missions? And I was like full-time missions? I was like, okay, let me pray about this. I'm not so sure. Like, I like it here in LA. It's comfortable. It's good. Yeah. And I just prayed about it. And I remember God just telling me, like, go for 2014. So I'm like, okay, like, I don't know how this is going to work, like what it's going to look like. Where do I go? And I just felt like Australia was the place to go. I just didn't know where else to go. And I'm like, Australia is cool. I had tons of opportunity to preach the gospel. So, hey. And so I decided, God, you're going to, again, have to open up the doors, because our church had just changed the way we did missions. So from there, like, I had to go through this training. And it just so happened that somebody from our church that was going to be doing the training couldn't make it. So the door's like, here you go, wide open, come on in. So went through the training, and again, like normally the way we would do things is you'd have to raise all your money before you go. And I just felt like God saying, you just need to go. So I'm like, oh, great. Like, what does that look like? So just packed up, said, I'm out, got a plane ticket, one-way plane ticket to Australia, ended up in Australia. And while I was out there, our denomination, basically the group within our church, basically said, hey, we're all good in Australia, but New Zealand needs a little bit of help. And apparently one of the pastors over there had been asking, hey, we need some help. Like, can you send some missionaries? Can you send some people to help out? There's a huge opportunity for us out there. And in that, so I was like, yeah, okay, I'll give it a go. I'll see what happens, go over there for a month, train up some people, and I'll just go back to Australia.
So you wanted to go to Australia?
Yeah, that was my heart's desire. Right. I just loved Australia. Yeah. Maybe it was the accent, or the weather, or the beach, or, but yeah, it ended up being, a month in Australia. And then I was like, okay, I'll go try New Zealand and see. And when I went, for about a month, I was like, okay, I'm going to train, do everything I can, as much as I possibly can. And in that, probably about a week before, I'm like, okay, I'm going to just go and pray again. So I went to the South Island for about 6 days, rented a car, just went around the island and just slept in the car. Just for like 6 days, which was absolutely amazing. And on the last day, I remember, I think it was my birthday, because I had to come back and preach a sermon. I was just out there, and I was out at the beach, and I was looking up at the stars, and I just felt like God was saying, this is the place I want you to be. This is where I want you to be. So in that, I said, okay, I'm going to stick around. I'm going to be here. And 4 years later, I was still in New Zealand. And it was it's just crazy how God opened up doors and closed doors where he didn't want me to be. And through that, began this journey of really starting to understand, or as much as you possibly can understand, what a life of sacrifice is. Like I said, I went out there with no funds. The visa I was on said, hey, you're not allowed to work. And if you work, it has to be for the church. Well, being the church that it was, they just didn't have funds for a missionary. So technically, if I did anything outside of work, I'd be breaking the law, and I didn't want to do that, because then they'd kick you out of the country. So that was my real first experience with faith.
Like trusting
God. Not saying, hey, I got faith, but like, no, God, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Do not know where my money's going to come from.
Don't know where I'm going to stay, if I have to stay under a bridge, like how this is going to look. And just one thing after another. It was absolutely the most amazing thing where, it was just like, how's this going to look? And God would provide a place for me to stay. And then God would provide funds. And I remember I was just out and about in the city one day, had $26 left in my account. That's it. And there was this homeless guy, and he's like, do you have any money? And I was like, I don't know. But I felt like God was saying, you just need to sit with him, talk with him. Yeah. And I felt like by the time I was done talking with him, God's like, give him your $26. So I'm like, wait, hold on.
Shoot.
I got 26. I don't know where I'm going to start. There's just a lot of unknowns.
I can give him my time.
I'll give him my time. And so I gave him that money. And I kid you not, like a day later, just money appeared in my account. Just
didn't know where.
I have no clue where it came from.
That's awesome.
And again, that's where I started to really understand what walking in faith was. Not just saying I have faith, but like walking in faith. Like, God, I don't know how this is going to happen. I have to trust you. You've called me to it. So you're going to get me through it. And yeah, that's kind of a little bit about my journey on the mission field.
Yeah. What was it like for you being single on the mission field?
So being single in the mission field, well, first of all, like our mission story is a little bit different in a sense where you had a team that you went out with. I went out absolutely alone. So when I got out there, the whole idea is like, you're trying to break into circles of relationships that have been established for years and years and years. And for me, you're kind of like the outsider. And thank God I had some people that really kind of brought me in. The pastor was great, and some of those things. But they still have lives, right? They have their own family. They have all this stuff that's going on. And
you're just the single.
Yeah, I'm just the single guy on the missionary field. And so you really have to learn how to live alone. And I think this is where I began to understand that my faith was really my own. And as being single is super hard because, again, I'm at that age where I wanted to be married. And
how old are you at this point?
I think I was 33 because Jesus had just finished his mission and it was time for me to take over.
You started yours.
And I started my mission.
Nice.
So in that, 33. So I'm a little bit on the older side according to society. Like, hey, you should be married by now. Like most of my people that I went to high school with have kids that are 16, 17 years old. So there's a lot of pressure, and a lot of that pressure is just inward. But being in the place I was at, it was no different than here. Like people are still getting married. They're still having kids. You're still surrounded by that. Yeah. And yet you're the single guy, in a whole nother country, different culture. And in that, that's when being in LA, I had a good group of people around me, good people that would kind of hold me accountable through like my struggles and all that stuff. And, going out there, all that's gone, right? So
you're like support group.
Yeah, your support group. Yeah. So at that time, now I have to realize what it's like to really walk on my own. And that's when it's like, okay, is this real? Right? Do you fully trust me in everything? And I think through that, I really learned how to be like, okay, God, like I have to trust you, and I can't just rely on somebody saying, hey, how you doing? Like, it's like me and you, God, and I need you to walk me through every step of this.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. So you were there for 4 years. What were you doing there? So my mission consisted of a lot of discipleship. So I feel like God had given me the ability to go to school. And in that school, I feel like I just learned a lot. And in that, it was like, okay, well, now what are you going to do with this? Right. So the education that I was able to learn about was just passed on, so a lot of working with youth, young adults, even, the main church is a pastor. Right. It's like, hey, how can I teach you what I've learned? Like Jesus said, walk with me, and then go. Right. And I was at that place where it's like, what I'm doing. Yeah.
Okay, now it's time for me to go.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. Sweet. Well, is mission something that you would recommend for everyone?
Well, yes and no. Yeah. Yes and no. So here's the thing. We talked about being single, what that looks like. And when you're single, you want to stay active. You want to do things. You want to go out and serve. And so if that is the mission field, then yes. So should everybody pack up their bags and move to Africa or wherever, wherever it is? No. Yeah. But do we all have a mission field around us?
Yes.
Yes, we do. Yeah. So, but as far as overseas missions, I feel if God's calling you to, then of course we need to be faithful and walk in obedience and say, hey, God, I trust you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also, I think there's huge benefit to being single on the mission field. I mean, it's hard if you don't have a team of people that you're surrounded with, like a team that you go with. But if you're alone or you're with a team, I think being on the mission field as a single person, you have all that time and energy to devote fully to ministry and to reaching out. Whereas if you have a family, like how kind of Paul talks about being torn, you're torn between your earthly, responsibilities and, ministry. So I think like you were able to fully devote all of your time and energy, and me too, into what God had called us to. So there's definitely benefits for both. I mean, being married and being single.
Right. And when you are married, because, I do know a lot of people in the mission field that are married and they've dedicated their life to go make disciples in other countries. And, again, God will take care of you. But like you said, you're torn a little bit. Like, hey, I still have to take care of my kid and I have to take care of, my wife, and I have to do all these other things. Yeah. But when you're single, you're absolutely right. Like there is nothing in the world that's going to stop you. And that's where, again, if you do it proper in a way that says, hey, I'm going to live a selfless life, all my desires, everything I'm going to set aside, and I'm going to walk into the unknown and say, God, wherever you lead me, I'm going to go. But that's what you have to learn when you're on the mission field is your life is no longer your own. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely a lifestyle of sacrifice.
But again, moving forward, you get married, and you've lived a life of missions or learning how to fully just surrender your life over. It makes marriage so much better. Because it's already like these patterns that you've created in your life that says, hey, it's not about you anymore.
Living selflessly.
Right. It's about your wife, or it's about your kids, or it's about,
giving of yourself. Yeah. Man, that's awesome.
So
thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Next time we are going to talk about how we actually met, because we both met right after the mission field, or for him it was a couple of years later. I had just gotten off the mission field, and it's kind of a fun and funny story. We'd love if you guys join us for next time.
Yeah, don't miss out on this one, guys, because this is probably our favorite story. And this, to be honest, this is where we have been inspired to do this, right? Because God has done so much in our story together that we get to inspire you guys, and hopefully that you guys can, just learn some things and just be encouraged. Yeah. So,
Anyways, thanks so much for joining us. We love you and praying for you guys. And take care.
Till next time.
Ciao.
Bye-bye. My baby's going off in the next room. Bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye.